Hi. Welcome to Building in Success with Market First Development. My name is Charles Perry, and I'm the owner of Medikite Software. I've had Medikite Software as my primary form of employment since 2012, but we've actually had apps in the App Store for longer than that, since about 2009. We've had a lot of success with the productivity apps that we've had in the iOS App Store in that time, and it's been a great adventure to be able to jump out and be able to go indie and start my own business. I'm also the co-host of a podcast called Release Notes, which, as the tagline up there says, is a weekly conversation about the business of indie software development. Now, I say that not to suggest that I know more about the business of software than any of you do, because some of you probably have more successful businesses than I have. But it does mean that I have to think about the business of software a lot. And it means that I get to speak to people like you at conferences like this. And one of the things that comes up over and over in my conversations is that there's just a lot of people out there who would like to go indie. There's a lot of people out there who would like to be able to build up their business to the point that they can support themselves with their own products without taking outside venture capital or outside funding. It's not just my own conversations that lead to that, though. I mean, there's actual data to suggest that this is really happening, that there's this many people that want to go indie. There was a survey done by a company called Vision Mobile, which was released last year. And in that survey, they asked other developers, mobile developers, across all different platforms, why it is that they were in mobile. What was it that was their primary motivation for being involved? And fully 24% indicated that they wanted to make money, which is probably not a great surprise. And 35% said that they wanted to build up a software business. With 24% wanting to make money, 35% wanting to build up a business, I don't think it's a great leap to suggest that there's a lot of people out there that really do want to be able to support themselves with their business, that want to have a financial motive, something more than just a hobby. And so, the problem is with this that it's really hard to do. Even though there's a lot of people who want to go indie, what we find is that there's not a lot that have actually been able to take that leap. There was a survey done again by Vision Mobile, released just this year, that spoke to different developers and asked them where it is they got their revenue, whether or not their apps were bringing in revenue. And what they found is that the largest group, almost 25%, didn't make any revenue at all from their apps. The second largest group, 23%, made less than $100 a month. That's not a lot of money. The third largest group made less than $1,000 a month. Now, what this tells me is that it's really, really hard to make it as an indie. In fact, it wasn't until we got to the last three smaller groups, that we found apps that were capable of supporting full-time employment for their developers. So, it's probably not the most useful metric to just look at absolute dollars when trying to decide whether people are finding success in the App Store. Because a lot of us come from different places, and we have different goals. Some of us live in very expensive cities, some of us live in rather inexpensive cities. We have large families and small families, and it takes different amounts of money for us to be successful and be able to support the lifestyle that we want to lead. And so it makes sense that we look not necessarily just at the dollars and cents, but also look at how people feel about their development efforts. And what we find is that in another survey, this time conducted by the Gartner Group, released this year, that, frankly, not a lot of people are finding success. The neat thing about this survey that was conducted by the Gartner Group is that they contacted lots of developers and they asked them, how many of your apps are financially successful? But the really interesting thing is that they didn't try to define what financially successful meant. They left it to each developer to define for himself whether or not his apps were financially successful. And in looking at the results, frankly, they're pretty depressing. Now, what they found is that virtually all the apps out there, at least in the iOS App Store, are not considered a success by their developers. In fact, only 0.01% of apps in the iOS App Store are considered to be financially successful by their developers. 0.01%. That little red square in the corner is drawn to scale. And so that really got me thinking. It's like, how is it that in such a tough environment, how is it that we can, as developers, have really any shot at all of of jumping into mobile and maybe having a chance of starting our own business, maybe having a chance of becoming independent, and maybe having a chance of supporting ourselves with our own efforts. And it made me think about, why it is that so many people are having so many troubles. And what I realized is that the one thing that we all have in common is that we're all developers. So many of us get into this thing that as a business model, we can just think of a great idea, build it, and then profit will just magically occur. But what we find is that for so many, that profit just never materializes. So how is it we can grow our chances? How is it we can beat the odds? How can we enter the app store, enter mobile, trying to start a new business, and have better than that 0.01% chance of being financially successful? How can we grow our odds to something a little more reasonable, like maybe 4%, or maybe even 9%? How do we go ahead and make a shot of that? And what I think we need to do is we need to stop thinking like developers, and we need to start thinking like entrepreneurs. We need to stop building apps just because we can, and just because they make a cool technical demo, and instead ask ourselves, what will people actually pay for? But how do we know what people are going to pay for? How do we know what's going to cause a customer to part with his money? Well, I was reading a book recently called Start Small, Stay Small, A Developer's Guide to Launching a Startup by a guy named Rob Walling. And it was a really great book. It's very thin. I suggest you look it up, read it. It won't take you more than a day or two. But in that, he talks about some of the success factors for building a great software company. And his book deals mostly with desktop software and software as a service, but a lot of the lessons that are in there apply just as well to mobile. And one of the things he realizes that there are certain things that contribute to success or failure for independent software companies. And in it, he in particular pointed out 4 different success factors. First, market. Who is it that we're selling to? How much money do they have? How willing are they to spend that money? What kind of competition is there out there? 2, marketing. How well are we able to communicate the benefits that our software provides to the customer? 3, aesthetics. How pretty is our software? How well does it fit into the overall ecosystem? And 4, functionality. What does our app do? How well does it do it? But Rob Walling's key insight wasn't that there are 4 main success factors for a software business. His key insight was that these 4 success factors contribute unequally to the success of a software business. In fact, market, more than any other factor, is what determines whether we're going to succeed or fail in a software business. Don't believe me? Watch this.
Summer. The West just got wilder. Ben Stein and Shaquille O'Neal are locked and loaded.
New sheriff in town, people!
There's a great new HD triple play offer from Comcast.
We gotta spread the word.
You can lock in $99 a month for 2 years.
Locked and loaded.
Get ready for an amazing offer.
Free HD, faster internet, unlimited nationwide calling.
$99 a month. For how long?
Just make it 2 years.
You just can't beat the new Comcast HD Triple Play offer. Call 1-800-COMCAST now and get HBO included, a free HD DVR for 6 months, and $100 cash back. All for only $99 a month when you lock in for 2 years.
What happened to Shaq and Son?
They got a better offer.
Oh, okay.
But hurry, this offer ends July 12th and it is loaded with features. So call 1-800-COMCAST today.
What a horrible commercial. What does a basketball player dressed up like a cowboy have to do with cable television service? Not much. So how is it that a company as large as Comcast has found such success when they have such horrible marketing out there? Well, to understand that, you've got to know a little bit about Comcast in the U.S. television market. Comcast is the largest cable television provider in the United States, and they serve a lot of the internet service as well. But in most of the cities that they serve, they're a monopoly. They have no competition at all. And so how is it that Comcast has been able to find so much success? Easy. They have a great market. They have a product that everybody wants, cable television service and access to the internet, and no competition. Market beats marketing every single time. This is Netscape Navigator 1.0. This is the web browser that I cut my teeth on in college. But I can't help but look back at this today and realize that it's not much to look at. In fact, it's pretty ugly. So how is it then a piece of software that's frankly so ugly was able to become the dominant web browser of its time? Well, easy. It has a great market. It had something that everyone wanted, visual access to the World Wide Web. And they were just about the only game in town. Market beats aesthetics every single time. BlackBerry. We're all familiar with the company. Today they're pretty widely regarded as sort of a washed-up has-been of a company. But in their time, they dominated mobile. Despite the fact that when they came to market with exactly one feature. Two-way messaging, or two-way paging as it was referred to back then. So how is it that a company that came to market with only one feature was able to become the dominant force in its category? It had a great market. It had a feature that everyone wanted, instant communication, and it was selling to a great demographic, affluent professionals. Market beats functionality every single time. And so if we accept that market is in fact the most important factor when it comes to building a software business, if we accept that market beats marketing, that market beats aesthetics, and that market beats functionality, it makes sense then that if we're going to start our own software business, that we start with what's most important, that we start with marketing. And so that's what I want to talk about for the rest of today is market-first development. Because when we're talking about market-first development, we're sort of taking the traditional model, the one that we're all most comfortable with, of thinking of a great idea and building it, and throwing that out the window. And instead, we're going with what is the most important thing for our success, the market. We're analyzing the market. We're choosing our own customers so that when we eventually build a product, we'll have people that will actually buy it. So when we talk about market-first development, we're really talking about a three-step process. We want to choose a market, we want to conceive of the product, and then we want to execute. Now, we're going to leave execution as sort of a task for the audience. You're going to have to do that yourself, but we are going to talk about the first two today. So when we talk about choosing a market, again, we're talking about three things. When choosing a market, we want to enter a niche that has money and values its time. Now, this first point in particular might seem a little counterintuitive, and you might need a little convincing. After all, why bother to enter a small market when instead we can enter a large market? Why market to a niche and make a little bit of money when instead we could market to a mass market and make a lot of money? Well, you have to remember what our goals are here. I'm working under the assumption that we want to bootstrap our business, that we want to be able to go indie and have our own software business without taking outside funding. And with that comes, well, some disadvantages. The nice thing about marketing to a niche is that it minimizes those disadvantages and accentuates the positive things that we have going in our favor. In particular, marketing to a niche makes us really focus in on our target market. It makes us really laser tight look at the problems that they have, and in particular how we can solve those problems. Think for a minute if we wanted to create a new general purpose word processor. We're going to disrupt Microsoft, we're going to take over the Microsoft Word arena, and we're going to just sort of take over the world. Well, if that's the case, we have to think about who's going to be using our product. Our word processor is going to be used in legal offices and in medical offices. It's going to be used by grandmothers writing their holiday newsletter, and it's going to be used by grad students writing their theses. Those are four wildly different markets. And those are just four. There's actually hundreds that are going to come into play if we try to make a general purpose word processor. There's just no way that I, as an individual, can really understand the problems that all these different types of groups are having and then try to actually solve them. But if we focus in on the problem, we really have a chance of truly, intimately understanding the concerns and the problems that our market faces. And we have a chance to really fix those problems, to offer a solution to them. We also have the chance of becoming an indispensable tool in that niche, so that anyone who gets into that market feels like they have to use our software. Yes, it's a niche, but if we're the only game in town, if we're indispensable, that's a pretty good place to be. Marketing to a niche also has the effect of decreasing competition in both quantity and in quality. Think about If you're a Microsoft or an Adobe of this world, and someone comes up to you and says, I have this great idea. I have this product idea, and it's going to bring in up to $250,000 per year. They don't care. That's not even going to cover their engineering costs. But for me, as an individual, oh yeah, $250,000 is really nice. I'll take that. That'll cover me. It might also even cover a small engineering team. So by really focusing on a niche, what we find is that we get into small places where the big players don't want to go. We insulate ourselves from competition from big players, so we don't have to worry about the Microsofts and the Adobes of this world coming in and eating our lunch, because they're simply not interested. Decreasing competition also has a few other nice side benefits. For example, it really decreases the cost of advertising. And yes, you have to advertise. You can't use the App Store as your advertising stream. The thing is, if I want to market to a mass market, like, say, Candy Crush. I want to be the next Candy Crush. I have to look at how it is they're getting the word out about their product. How are they finding their customers? They put glossy ads in magazines. They put advertisements on national television. I can't do that. I don't have the budget for that. But if I narrow my focus, if I bring it down laser tight to a smaller group, like, say, bird watchers in Belgium, I can find that group. I can market to that group. They have conferences, just like this one, only much smaller. And I might be able to sponsor their conference. They also have a newsletter. I can possibly take an advertisement out in their monthly newsletter and get my message out in front of all of their members. But I can only do that because there's less competition, because I'm catering to a niche. And the reason it's cheaper is because no one else wants to talk to them, frankly. And no one else wants to talk specifically to bird watchers in Belgium. And because there's less competition for that advertising space, the cost of that advertising space goes down. Supply and demand. Marketing to a niche and decreasing competition also has the effect of decreasing the quality of the advertisement that we're facing from competitors. Now, this is a rather iconic ad from Apple's iPod line. Everyone recognizes it. It's recognized worldwide. It's won awards, instantly recognizable. I do not want to have to compete against that. I can't afford to compete against that. I can't create ads like that. I can't afford people who can create ads like that. Luckily, if I'm catering to a niche, I don't have to. Because there's decreased competition in that niche, the people that I'm going up against aren't the Apples of this world. They're other people like me and you, other people who have limited resources, and their advertising isn't going to be this slick either. And so by comparison, my advertising, it looks much better. I look much more capable, which frankly is a good thing to be. Decreasing competition also has the effect of increasing revenue. That might seem a little bit counterintuitive, but it's true. Because when you think about it, if you're dealing with a very small niche, and there's less competition, you're one of the few players in there, you have the ability to understand your niche's problems. And you can get in and you can solve very painful problems. And if you can solve a very painful, very specific problem for a person, that makes your solution very valuable. And so I don't have to sell my software for 99 cents a pop. Or even worse, give it away for free. Instead, I can say, well, if you'd like a solution to your problem, that's going to take $9.99, please. By literally multiplying my revenue by a factor of 10, that gives me the ability to really give myself a buffer at the bottom of my revenue sheet at the end of the year. It gives me a longer runway that I can try to make it as a business. Marketing to a niche also has the effect of improving word-of-mouth advertising. Think about it. When you're dealing with a niche, the people that you're talking to all talk to each other. They work in the same workplace. They attend the same clubs. They hang out in the same online communities. And if you find a solution to a problem, they're going to tell their friends because they're probably having the same problem as well. And so by concentrating on a niche, you get other people to do your advertising for you. And in fact, you get even better advertising out of it because word-of-mouth advertising, the suggestion of one friend to another, is frankly the best kind of advertising you can get. Better than anything you can buy, certainly. And so if we're convinced that we do actually want to enter a niche when we're choosing our market, that leaves us with a niche that has money and values its time. Why bother with those? Well, we want a niche that has money because, frankly, we want money, and if they don't have it, they can't give it to us. But also, we want one that values its time because that's our value proposition. Our app, our solution, is either allowing them to spend more time in an activity that they enjoy, or it's allowing them to spend less time in an activity they don't like. Either way, time is the limited resource here, and that's the real thing that we're selling to our customers. So if we're going to choose a market, the first thing we have to do is do a little bit of brainstorming. We have to look at all the different niches that exist and try to come up with a good list. Now, there's lots of ways to do that. You can use any way that you'd like. But in my own experience, what I find is that it's useful to be able to look at brainstorm niches around 3 broad groups: hobbies, interests, and occupations. Now, when we're talking about hobbies, what we're talking about are activities that people enjoy doing, that they enjoy performing, things that they like to get out and take part in. When we're talking about interests, we're talking about things that people like to learn about, so things like astronomy or pets or parenting. When we're talking about occupations, clearly those are things that people do to earn money. And the nice thing about occupations in particular is that people have already made those lists for you. Go to any government website and you'll find page after page of different occupations that exist in that government area. So once we've done a little bit of brainstorming and we've found the niche or a list of niches, now we need to actually evaluate those. Because remember, the whole point of this is we're bootstrapping. We're trying to do this without outside funding, and that means we have limited resources. We can't enter all of these different markets. We have to choose one and pursue it. So how do we evaluate that list? How do we decide which ones are good and which ones we have to let go? Well, there's a couple questions you can ask yourself. And first of all, the first question you should ask yourself is the market big enough? Remember, we're going for a niche market, but we don't want one that's too small. We need one that's going to be large enough that we can actually support ourselves. So how do you tell? Well, it's a little bit of a black art. No one is, it's to some extent you're always going to be doing a guessing game. But there is a rule of thumb that you can use, and it's called the magazine test. If you go to your local bookstore, walk up and down the aisles, find the magazine rack, and when you're at the magazine rack, just browse the different titles that are there. And you're going to see magazines on lots of different topics. You'll find them on canoeing, you'll find them on camping, bird watching, parenting, pets, all these different topics. Now, the thing that all of these different topics have in common is that they all are popular enough to support a magazine, right? There are enough people out there interested in this topic to buy these magazines. And therefore, there's enough people out there reading these magazines that outside advertisers are willing to sink money into these topics. So what that tells you is that there's enough people out there to maybe support a software business. But we all know that dead tree magazines are sort of going the way of the dodo, and so we need to find a digital equivalent. And the digital equivalent of those magazines are online communities. If you can find a blog, if you can find a message board that has a large enough community to support an advertising market, that's an indicator that you might have found another topic that's large enough to support a software business. In addition to market, we also have to ask ourselves, can we reach the niche market? Can we get a hold of them? And really the easiest way to do that is online, given our limited resources. Now, this is a screenshot from my friend Jim Dalrymple's website, The Loop. And you don't have to advertise on this website, but this is a good generic example of all the different websites that are out there, because all of these websites have on them, no, it doesn't work well. It has over there on the right a little sidebar. And in that sidebar is where you want to be. You want to be where they have the advertisements, because that's how you get your message out to your niche market. If you can find where the bird watchers of Belgium congregate online, you can get to the blogs that they read, get to the places where they hang out. You have the ability to get your message to them. In addition to blogs, you should also definitely check out message boards, because message boards have one thing that's even better than blogs: two-way communication. You have the ability to interact with your target market. You have the ability to engage with them. You have the ability to be seen, to know about the topic, and as you start to build up a little bit of respect, a little bit of identity, when you start to offer a solution to them, they'll have reason to believe that you actually know what the heck you're talking about, which is great. Next question you need to ask yourself: is your niche market willing to spend money to solve their problem? I don't know. In general, the more affluent the group you're going after, the better, because remember, affluent just means they have money, and that's what you want. It also means that the per unit price of your solution, of your software, is going to be less consideration for them because they have more to begin with. But they don't have to be affluent. There are a lot of people out there that spend money on all kinds of things. So in general, the more passionate that your audience is about the niche that you're addressing, the more likely it is that they will spend money on that activity. Think of comic book collectors, right? Think about how passionate some of them can be about that topic. Think of all the money that's spent in comic books around the world every year. Okay, that's not a bad place to be. If you can find a community that is that passionate, you have a strong likelihood of being able to get some money out of them. So at this point, we've brainstormed some niche markets. Now we have evaluated them, so we have chosen our market. After we've chosen our market, we're ready to go on to step 2, conceive of the product. Now that we know who it is we want to sell our product to, now that we know who we want to be our customer, now we're ready to think of a product to suit that customer. And to do that, we're going to have to do a little brainstorming again. And as we brainstorm these product ideas, there's a couple different ways that we can do this. The first thing to ask yourself is, are you a part of the niche? Are you part of the community that you're trying to sell software to? If you are, fantastic. Just walk over to a mirror, look in it, and ask yourself, what kind of problems do I have? What thing frustrates me on a daily basis? What would make my life easier? And then write down those ideas. And those are some of your product ideas. But what if you're not part of that niche? We can't keep selling software to other software developers forever. At some point, we've got to get out of the software developer community and sell it to other people as well. So the likelihood is that your target market will not actually include you. And if that's the case, that's fine. It just means you need to go find someone who is in that target market. You need to find your family members, your friends, your spouse. Sit them down and actually interview them. Ask them questions. Ask them what their biggest frustration is on a daily basis, or on a weekly basis, or a monthly basis. Ask them what kind of thing just drives them nuts about their job. Ask them what their biggest frustration is in their activity that they enjoy doing. And as you get these answers back, as you start to get some ideas about what kinds of things are the pain points, those become product ideas. Another idea for brainstorming products. Take a look at real-world goods that you can make digital. Here I use encyclopedias as an example because there's not many encyclopedia dealers anymore. I think even World Book and Encyclopedia Britannica have stopped printing paper encyclopedias. They've lost that market almost entirely to the digital realm with Wikipedia. Well, there are other products out there that you can make digital. I, for instance, have an app called Benjamin, and it's meant for people who've attended online training or productivity training. And at the end of that training, the one thing that happens is as they walk out, they're handed a big binder of paper, right? A planner. So they can keep track of the different activities that they've done or that they need to do, and so they can follow the system that they just learned. Well, nobody wants to carry around big binders of paper anymore. And so I took that binder of paper, I took the system that they just learned, and I came up with a digital way of making it. And so essentially I've replaced a very specialized paper binder with a tool on your iPhone or your iPad. There's lots of things that are out there still, that still exist in paper form, that still exist as physical goods that can be converted to digital goods. And if you can do that, if they're willing to pay for the physical good, they might be willing to pay for the digital good as well. Another idea for brainstorming products. Co-opt desktop software. There's been a lot of discussion in the mobile community, especially in iOS world, that we are entering a post-PC world. That we are leaving the era of the desktop and the laptop, and that those two items will be relegated to merely specialized work, sort of like trucks on a road. And that most computing tasks will in the future be performed on tablets and mobile devices. Will it happen? I don't know. But if you believe it'll happen, now's the time to put your money where your mouth is. Get in front of that wave. Find some desktop software that caters to the niche that you've targeted and make a tablet version of that. Be in a position so that when your niche market does make a transition from the desktop to mobile, that you're there ready to be purchased. And if you do that, you might find yourself with a first mover advantage on mobile, and find yourself in a position of power before the guys that write the desktop software even thinking about making that transition. So again, we have a list of ideas, this time a list of product ideas. How are we going to take those product ideas and narrow them down? Because again, we don't have the resources to do everything. We've got to choose one idea and run with it. Well, there's a number of questions you can ask yourself. First of all, how painful is the problem that you're trying to solve? How frequently is that pain point felt? You know, the more painful and the more frequent the problem, the more likely it is that a person is going to pay for a solution to that problem. And if they're willing to pay for a solution to a problem, that's probably a product you want to make. Will your product save the customer money? Or better yet, will it make the customer money? You know, one of the easiest sales I can imagine is the value proposition that's offered by some of these mobile tools that keep track of receipts for business trips, right? You know, if you're an independent person, you're saving these receipts for trips, what you're basically selling is the chance for the user to pay you $10 up front for the software. And in exchange, you'll save them thousands of dollars when tax time comes around. Exchanging $10 for thousands of dollars seems like it should be a pretty straightforward value proposition to sell. If your product has something like that, make sure you advertise that to potential customers. Will your product save the customer time? After all, time is money, right? This is a particularly important one when you have a niche that's catered towards occupations. You know, employers are willing to spend money on tools if it makes their employees more efficient. Because ultimately, that's going to save them payroll down the line, and they realize that. So if you have an occupational niche, and part of your selling point is that you're saving time, making people more efficient, you should really play that up. Is your product best suited to mobile? Or is it best suited to a tablet form factor? If it is, that's a good argument that your product should be built. What's the competition look like out there? Is there competition? If so, is it strong competition? Just because there's competition in a space does not mean that you shouldn't get into it. One of the best situations I can imagine is a product space that has existing competition that's performing at a low level. Because if there's actual competition out there, that means people are buying that software. It's demonstrating the existence of a market. And if I can outperform my competitor, they're going to buy my software instead. I'm going to enter a market that I know exists for people who have a demand for a solution to the problem that I'm going to address, and I'm going to do better than the other people. That's great. If you can outcompete that competition, by all means, jump in. The last thing you need to look at, and I wish this weren't the case, but in mobile, sadly it is, you have to ask yourself, can I monetize this product? Can I make money off of it? You know, we're all familiar with sort of that death spiral, race to the bottom in pricing that's happened in the mobile sphere. You know, can I actually charge money? Can I make money off my product? Now, it doesn't matter how you make money, as long as you have a plan, but you've got to think about it up front. Am I going to just charge money in the traditional model where, you know, I charge money in exchange that I get software? Am I going to do something advertising related? Am I going to have subscriptions? Am I going to do some sort of freemium operation where I give away the software for free and then later charge for add-ons? Any of those are fine, but you've got to know at the very beginning, before you even get into it, before you even open your editor, how it is that you're going to make money off this product. Because there's a lot of products out there where you simply can't make money, and you don't want to be there. So we've conceived of the product at this point, and we're ready now to execute. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that execution was going to be left as an exercise for the audience, and I'm afraid it's going to be. You're going to have to do the execution yourself. I can't help you. But do know that you have to execute. You've got to operate at a very high level. You know, market, which we've just spent a lot of time looking at, is the most important factor in the success of a software business. But it's not the only success factor for a software business. There are the other ones as well. You've got to nail the market, but you've also got to nail marketing. You've got to nail aesthetics, and you've got to nail functionality. But if you do, know that you're going to stand a really good chance if you execute at a very high level, you're going to stand a very good chance of expanding that 0.01% chance of success and making it something that you can actually have a shot of surviving on, something that will give you a reason to believe that you can actually make it as an indie. And if you do, well, you might find yourself living the dream as well. Thank you for your time. Do we have any questions? I don't have all the answers, but I can share what I know. Nothing. Oh, yes?
Maybe you have a suggestion how to find out what model for charging client for my software to choose, whether upfront payment or something else?
The question was, how do I know what payment model to use? How do I decide how to monetize my software? Should I charge money up front? Should I go for advertising? Should I go for freemium? Whatever. Well, there's no one answer to that question, unfortunately. You have to sort of look at the environment that you're getting into. Each market is going to be a little bit different. But I think that the market that you get into is probably going to be one of the biggest determining factors. You've got to look at what other people in your space are doing, because the customers that are in that market are going to be used to one particular type, if that makes sense. So for instance, let's say games, I think, are an especially good example here, because the price of games have just gone through the floor. You basically have to give away games. That's where the whole freemium thing originated. If you come in with a set price now and try to charge money when they're used to free alternatives, that makes it really hard to convince somebody to buy your software instead. On the flip side, if you get into professional services, if you are selling software to companies, to professionals, maybe to business-to-business solutions, those guys are more used to shelling out money. They're used to having to pay for solutions to their problem. And in those cases, it's not going to be as hard of a sell to charge money up front. And in fact, it might be harder to try something like advertising instead. If you're trying to sell software to a business, they're probably not going to be interested in advertising supported solutions. So it's going to depend somewhat on the market that you're involved with. It's going to depend on who it is you're trying to sell software to and what type of product you're selling. But it's a good question, because that's one of the things you've really got to take a hard look at is how it is that you're going to make that monetization happen. Because if you can't make money off your software, you're not a business, you're a charity, and that's not really what we're going here for today. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
When do you know when to stop?
How do you know when to stop? So how do you know when to give up?
Yeah.
That's a very good question, and it's one that I've talked to other people about. It's hard because it's such an emotional. Let me repeat your question. His question was, how do you know when to stop? How do you know when to give up? How do you know when to throw in the towel? And it's a hard one to answer, because it's not just an intellectual question. It's also an emotional question. So many people invest their emotions into their business, and they identify with it. They make it part of their business, that it's hard sometimes to realize when you should have thrown in the towel 6 months ago. I can tell you that my wife and I have a plan for that, and we have goals for what we expect to see, and we have not really drop deadlines, but lines in the sand that if we don't exceed a certain amount, that we know it's time to start taking a hard look at maybe this isn't working out quite the way we wanted to. And that's probably the best answer I can give, is that you're going to need to look at your own situation. You're going to need to look at what your own needs are, given your family situation, given your location, given the expense of the community that you live in, and decide when it's just not enough, and when there's not enough of an outlook, a positive outlook, to make it worth continuing. And that's a really hard thing to do. Anyone? We have one in the back?
Market first.
Yes.
But don't you need an app to actually validate your market needs?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Market first, but don't you need an app to validate your market?
So his point was, yes, market first, but don't you need an app out there to actually validate your market needs? And yes, I think that's sort of getting into, and to some extent at least, the minimum viable product and things like that to see if there's an actual demand for your product. That is definitely part of it. It's obviously not part of my presentation today, but you do need to measure as you go through. You can't just blindly follow any rules, mine certainly, or anybody else's either, and just go follow them by rote and hope for the best, because there is no single recipe for success. You're going to have to test and measure and test and measure and test and measure and look at the results and see what works and what doesn't. And I think the best advice I can give anybody is stay nimble. Keep an eye for what's working, but also keep an eye out for what's not working. And don't be afraid to adjust your plans. If you get a product, if you've gone through the market analysis and you found the right market you want to sell to, and you find that the product that you're selling just isn't working, it's time to find something else. That doesn't mean that you might not have the right market. It might mean that you have the wrong product for that market. But you might have the wrong market too. So what you're going to have to do is just keep an open mind. Don't get too stuck in past decisions. Don't get too invested in what you've already done in the past. And keep an eye out towards having to find what's next. Because I think that's one thing that I found with a lot of the entrepreneurs that I found in mobile is that they don't get stuck with just one thing. They're always looking for that next thing. The thing that's going to be their next source of income. And if you can cobble a bunch of those together, you might serve a couple different markets, you might have a couple different products, and be able to cobble together a living that's going to support you and your family. Well, I think that's all I see. So thank you for coming, and enjoy the rest of the conference.